This is the Cortez City Council work session / special meeting. Today's Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and the time is 6 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with A on our agenda. Council will take pictures at Calkins Commons Building located at 121 East 1st Street, Cortez. So we're going to leave and go take pictures, and then we'll be back for item B on our agenda. Okay. All right, council is back from our photos, which will be posted to the website soon. All right, so we're going to move on to B on our agenda, discussion on council city manager communication. Drew Sanders?
Yep, good evening, council. Thought we had a little bit of time on our agenda this evening that I would approach council. It seemed like an opportune time to talk about council manager communication and kind of get an understanding of how you feel like it's working. There are many ways to skin a cat, and as it were, and a lot of different techniques and ways we can go about it. And I'm just trying to make sure that I tweak this to where it fits us and our council appropriately. So I'm coming to council and asking how you feel about the communication process, and are you getting the information you need? And if you're not, then we need to figure out ways to get that to you quicker and more efficiently. So with that being said, I'd like to pose that to the council.
I'll start. I know when I first met with Rachel, when I first came on board, one of the concerns I had was the mayor meeting with the city manager and not being informed on that. We have received minutes and agendas for that, and I greatly appreciate that. And I just want to make sure that I'm as informed as everyone else. And when there's meetings that take place that we're not part of, I just want to make sure I receive that information.
Okay.
I've really been impressed with the dissemination of information since I've been on council. I feel like you send us alerts for urgent things via text or faster communication. Anything else through email or phone calls. I trust you and the staff to disseminate information. Yeah, I don't really have any critiques to add. You are very available if I have questions or follow-ups, which I really appreciate. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd second that as well. I think I feel like I'm getting all of the information that I need. I do think that the minutes for the mayor's meeting is a great improvement. I think that is really helpful just to see kind of what's going on in the city ahead of a regular agenda. So that, to me, that's helpful. But otherwise, I think communication is really good. I think Drew's always been really responsive if I have a question about something or anything like that. So thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with both Lydia and Robert. I think it's just exactly the right amount of information. And part of it, I think, is knowing you and knowing the mayor. I really trust you both in those conversations. And I think that the information I get is just enough. You've always made yourself available to me. If I had more questions, I could call you up. And it seems like within the same day, you're able to spare a few minutes either on the phone or in person. So I don't know. I feel like it's adequate, and I appreciate that I'm not inundated with extra information all the time. So thank you for that.
Hi, Drew. So I think I have I've had a couple of concerns that I believe have been addressed. Number one, when I first came on, one of the things that I felt was definitely lacking was that I did not feel there were briefings, like uniform sort of structured briefings outside of what was happening at the council. And you and I spoke about that, and that was when you informed me about the city manager meetings, which was to be the conduit for us getting more and more information. And since you all have started getting the minutes from that out, I think it's been very helpful. I think that this is not an issue of personalities, it's an issue of process. And as you sit up here and you look at 7 different people, everybody has 7 different styles of how they receive information, and they have 7 different time frames as far as what they would need and want to be putting towards the job. I may have a lot more time that I want to look into one thing than another council member. And so we all have different needs and styles. I think one of the important things that we keep in mind here is that this is an open process, that we have a free flow of information, and that, that not any one member of the council gets any more information than the next when it comes to matters. So given that, that's where we're at. And I think that we're making good changes in that direction. I appreciate the things that have been come up so far. But I don't know that there's such a thing as too much information. And I think it's good that the majority of people get what they need. But if someone needs more information, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing sinister about that, and it should be, that's what we're hired to do by the people that we represent. So given that, that's where I'm at.
And there's zero problem, I mean, for the entire council, there is zero problem with asking for additional information, and I provide that to councilors regularly, and I try to do that very promptly, because if you're asking, that matters.
May I say one more thing before, because I don't think Dennis has spoken yet, but along those lines, it's a very hard balance, I think, to find the place between you answering 7 different questions about the same issue. And I think that's where we're lacking some form of uniformity. Let's say there's an issue with a park, for example, that maybe 3 of us know about, but the other 4 don't. And so it's instead of you getting 7 different phone calls, it's not an effective use of your time. So I don't know where the balance with that is, but I know you're trying to find it, and we're all working towards it, and so thank you.
Yeah, but I agree that that's the case, and generally, I kind of see which way the wind's blowing, as it were, and if I start seeing it getting 1, 2, generally more than 2 calls on the same item, then I'm usually preparing a position paper or something. We haven't had that in recent months, but, or something that we're already briefing you on. But generally, if I'm starting to see that it's going that way, then I try to get something out, a product out of some sort that's going to keep you all informed. And there's 2 parts of that, Counselor. Me making 7 phone calls, but there's also 7 of you making 1 phone call as well, and your time's valuable as well. So.
Well, I've sit here trying to think of something humorous to say. Everybody seems so serious, so I won't. I have no issues. If I have a problem, I come to you, it's solved. If it's not solved, we discuss it, so there's no issue here.
You know, Drew, I do want to say, one thing I greatly appreciate, and I think every council member here appreciates, is if something comes up, you always give us a heads up, so nothing catches us off guard, and that is greatly appreciated, so thank you.
Yeah, and I think that these questions brought up the great process of having minutes for our meetings and those being disseminated, because in the past, I've struggled a little to find the balance of being a working person and also having this role as mayor, which just inevitably takes a lot of time. And so I've kind of relied on other council members to reach out to you directly with questions. And I think that this is a great way for them to see the kind of topics, to get a reminder of the topics that are coming up, or a refresher on what's going on, and then they can still go to you and get more information. And I appreciate that when one of us asks you a question about a topic, you assume that we'll all probably want to know, and you share it with all of us. So I think that's another great process. And like April said, sometimes we want to know more and more information. And I think that's great that we can get all of that from you, and I think it is important that we always go to you for those questions, because we also don't want to cause staff to be all working on different things as well. So I just appreciate how responsive you are and available, and just the work that you're doing and keeping us informed. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that, but I will also, and I've been pretty vocal about this since I've worked for you, is that I feel there's always a little something else we can do. So I'm going to ask council that as we move forward and if things aren't working just quite right, let's try to tweak it and make it work just a little better. I do have an idea that I wanted to pose to council and get your feedback on. I don't know how well it's going to work, but I'm going to try. I've developed a spreadsheet, and Wendy and Linda Smith are involved with it, where I'm trying to project out the entire year's council meetings. And then put on there, I mean, there's some predictable things. You know, we know when the first reading of the budget ordinance is going to be. We know when the second reading is going to be. We know when some predictable things are going to go on there, but also there's some burgeoning and emerging issues that it would be nice to know, well, that's coming up in October. And if I can do that, I would like to have IT help me share the rights so that you all can just go on and look at the spreadsheet yourself and see what's on there. So is that going to be an overwhelming thing, or is that even going to be useful at all, or maybe just to some? I guess the question is, would it be not useful?
It's a good question, because I don't want you to do all that work, and then if
Exactly.
So this would be just things that come up in a normal course of a year that are basically on the calendar.
Right, or things that we know are coming up. We got a couple of land use things coming up. And you know, it'd be nice to put those on there. So you know, one of them, at least one of them, may be kind of controversial in October. It'd be nice for you to be able to know that and you know, be able to mentally prepare for that. You know, a lot of things, especially land use, we're at the mercy of the process. So you know, we may not be ready to get it in front of P&Z, and then our process is we really need to wait 30 days. And it's not that we're trying to drag our feet, but we have found that if we don't let P&Z do their work, and then if we try to get it on right the next council, almost always there's a mistake, there's an error. So we try to bump that out to the second council meeting pass so that we vet all that out. But all I'm trying to say is that as much as possible, I would like to let you know what to anticipate.
To me, that would be helpful. I did have a question about will it be a public document, and I guess will then if you're putting, I mean, I understand putting on like budgeting things and things that are coming up later in the year, but if you're putting on stuff that's coming up through P&Z, is it just going to move that issue up if it is now a public document that's on the council agenda, not agenda, but on the council calendar? Does that make sense what I'm?
Yeah, no, it really won't, because we're not officially noticing it. I mean, okay. All we're doing is trying to give you an idea. And part of it is, you know, I can tell you it won't be 100%. You know, we're going to shoot for this item, this meeting. It may or may not be there, but it should be right around there. In the way of a public document, actually it is. We're not just going to post it on the website. Yeah. Just because it's raw information that, you know, it's not ready to go out. But if someone was to send in a core request, I mean, share it with you. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Okay.
It's really just meant to keep things on the radar, really.
I think that would be helpful. I think particularly around like the P&Z stuff, I think could also be helpful in the way where you've notified us of things in the past that we may be starting to get calls about that's starting to come into P&Z, and that way we can be prepared to say, we can't discuss that. It's going to be on our agenda.
Yeah.
But I think that could be really helpful there as well.
Yeah, now I would just caution you once again that as the city manager communicates information or you request information, if you're, because sometimes you may be tempted to survey the other council members. What do you guys think about this? Certainly, then you run into problems with the open meetings law and, you know, the whole idea that public business should be done in the public, and so you can't, by a serial chain phone call or email, avoid that process. So, you know, if he's just sending you information, and if you see something that you think needs to be discussed, then my recommendation is that you respond back to the city manager and say, you know, I think we should put this one on a work session and get some more information and discuss what direction we might want to go and that sort of thing. Because certainly, as Mr. Sanders said, you know, just providing you with the information, that's a public document if it's done in written form. Unless there's some sort of deliberative process that's going on, or it's work product. So if he's sharing a draft of something with you, that's not a public document, and there are exceptions under CORA that would provide an exemption from public disclosure. But most of the time, if it's just informational sharing and there's not any deliberation going back and forth, that is a public document that can be discovered under CORA. It doesn't have to go on the website, but if somebody requests it, we would be required to turn it over and disclose it. But, you know, just the cautionary note that once you cross the line over from just receiving or disseminating information and move into the discussion of the information, then you probably need to look at putting it on an agenda item either for a work session or a regular meeting.
And perhaps one more thought on that, and I think I'm about done. The other one is, and I think I maybe frustrated one or two of you in the past where you usually won't render an opinion on a matter. What I do is, it's not my job to do that. You're the decision makers. But it is my job to provide you with guidance and considerations. And council that's covered over, you've seen a couple of my position papers before where I don't advocate one way or another, but I do say, here's your considerations to go by. So please don't get frustrated with me if I don't render an opinion. It's not my role.
Just one more comment on the spreadsheet. Is it something that could also be useful for all your senior staff and be used by them so everyone can kind of like a tracking document?
Yeah, actually, yeah, thank you. That was left out of that, but yes, that actually would be shared with them, and they would have rights to edit that.
All right, I think that's actually, it's a good idea. Let's try it out and see how it helps.
Okay, thank you so much, council. I didn't mean to budget this much time, but I didn't know how long the discussion would go. So anyway, thank you so much for the guidance.
All right, we'll move on to C on our agenda, general council discussion. Does any council member have a topic they'd like to bring up? Go ahead, yeah, please.
There's been rumblings, I don't know if this is the place to talk about it or not, but I've heard rumblings of an increased rate of car thefts and crime in general. Is this a place to talk about that or get information about that, or?
Yeah, actually, if the mayor, she's the chair, obviously, but yes, and thank you for the reminder on that. I was going to talk about that in my manager's report, but yes, I don't know about car thefts, and we do have our assistant chief here with us tonight, but I can tell you there has been some increased crime in and around our parks that's just a little bit concerning. We've actually, one of our senior staff members, his wife was accosted, I understand, in our main park, and she wasn't injured or anything or even assaulted, that I understand, but the police did respond and make an arrest there. We've got some complaints going, especially in Montezuma Park, which is historic, and we are trying to address that now and taking steps to deal with that. But when it comes to crime, it's the crime outdoors and in the parks that's concerning me. Our police are doing a great job of dealing with it when it comes, but there's honestly very little we can do to prevent it. And law enforcement's role is to reduce crime, fear, and disorder, but it is very hard because The people that are involved in this kind of behavior also have a right to be in the park if they're behaving appropriately. So yes, it is concerning. Do you have any comments, Chief?
So I was just gonna say, and you can probably help with this, are the crime numbers going up, or is the type of crime changing, or both?
No, they should be able to put it on for you.
We are having quite a bit of crime in the park. As far as stolen cars, we have a few, and that's an uptick, but then it'll die off. So there's really a major uptick in that. See, I could have done that from here. And I'm sorry, what was your other question?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating what you just said?
Could you repeat what you said? We have trouble.
Certainly. There has been an uptick in crime in the park. It's summertime, it's hot, that's what happens. Unless you have somebody in the park at all times, stuff's almost unavoidable. Car thefts is not really on the rise. If we have one or two, that seems like a rise, but then it dies off for a long period of time. So we had a car stolen here last week. It's been recovered, everything's fine, but we did have a car theft, and that's an uptick, but it's really not a trend.
So are the crimes in the park the same annually this time of year, or is it an increase specifically this year?
Summertime is always an increase. Yeah, it dies down in the wintertime, raises in the summertime, and it's the same people doing the same things. It isn't different than it was last year, and it's not different than it was the year before. It's just unfortunate.
But we are experiencing, in Montezuma Park, the stage over there has increasingly become a magnet. Some people like to try to camp under there. Law enforcement's been addressing that and making sure, because that is a reservation-only space, and making sure that that's addressed. But the last 2 years in Montezuma Park, exact same time of year, we had the exact same problems. We're trying to be proactive with it and get ahead of that. So what can be done is being done. Okay. It's just concerning, and I felt like it was something that council needed to be talked about. So thanks for reminding me, Councilor.
And it's different. The Montezuma Park is particularly difficult. We have businesses right there, and we have homes right there that are very active in wanting to see the park remain real clean and some of that element out of there. But everybody has the same right in every park. And so if you have a scheduled event, you can rent that. But one person can be in there and sit down in it, the same as they can in the other parks. That park just gets complained on more because we have residents right there and we have businesses right there. But you can't just go in there and say, nobody can be on this, you can't be on this concrete. If a group has it rented, they own it. But if a group doesn't have it rented, you're all welcome to go in there and sit in the shade. So that's the difficulty.
Okay.
You have to treat them all fair.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay.
Before you sit down, how is the graffiti efforts?
Again, we'll say an uptick. We had 2 or 3 hits in the last week or so, but we hadn't had any for 2 or 3 weeks before that. So we had a couple hits, but I don't know that it's a huge uptick. It's almost like the stolen cars. If we don't have anything for the next couple weeks, somebody went out and tagged one night. But if it continues, then we've got something going on.
Okay.
So.
I have another question. Are we seeing an increase in the amount of non-English speaking natives, anything like that in our community that some of the nation is experiencing right now? The if you would have the term illegal immigrants or whatever. Are we actually seeing that? Encampments, things like that sort of thing? Are you guys dealing with that? Because you guys are the ones that are going to deal with it more than any.
We're not seeing that same,
Good.
to that same degree, no. We're behind in everybody, so that's okay.
I'm just curious while we have time and you're in the podium. From your experience, I understand the complexity of having these public spaces where everyone deserves to be treated equally. How, from your experience, would you mitigate these issues? Like, do you find having more presence, police or non-police, is helpful? Like, what would your dream park scenario be?
Absolutely more presence. You know what, if we have those e-bikes that we can zip around the park like nobody's business. If we could get those utilized on a daily basis and get out there and be in the parks would be huge.
So what does your park patrol look like currently?
In between calls, we go to the park.
So it's like we don't have staff where it's like someone is on the park.
Yeah, there's nobody on the park. We're patrolling, we're going call to call. The guys are coming in and writing reports, which takes hours out of their shift. But we don't have anybody specifically dedicated to the park, which is what the park needs.
Okay, thank you.
I've heard of other communities having like peace officers or park rangers, you know, someone who's not like a full LE. But maybe like housed under the Parks Department or maybe your department. I mean, is that like kind of an in-between?
That is kind of an in-between, and I believe that would work if you had the right person. If you have the wrong person, you're putting somebody in danger.
Okay.
And so that worries me.
Madam Mayor, the Parks and Recreation Forestry Advisory Board has talked about that very thing at our last meeting and the meeting before that. So I think that is something that could come to fruition. Some people were concerned because they wouldn't have the full authority as a police officer, but really just kind of a presence to check in with people, like how are things going today? And certainly have a cell phone to call the police if they notice that there's something that's not copacetic in a park. I just want to say that like I'm like Sarah Palin, like I can see the park from my front door, and you guys have done a much better job this year than the previous year of keeping down the number of people that are just kind of hanging in the park. And I haven't really experienced a lot of issues this year, but previously it was like you would have a lot of people just verbally harass and scream at you when you're walking down the street and things like that. I just didn't feel very safe or comfortable. So kudos to you guys for doing a better job, I think, this year than last, and really being on top of it. It's good.
Appreciate that very much. The one thing about the civilian out there in the park is that one day they're going to call and we're going to have 3 officers on a wreck that we can't get to them. So that's where I hate for them to put themselves in a position that we can't be there to help.
Well, between Matt and Dennis, we've got 2 park rangers already living near parks.
I was just about to bring that up. It's not my place to school the council on law enforcement. It's up to law enforcement to do that. But if we have a park ranger, the only thing he can do is call the police. So now what you have is another person calling the police. If they had a policeman there in the first place, they would be done and over with. So it does put somebody in extreme danger. And if you don't get the right person, they could exceed their authority, and it costs the city a lot of money because they're acting in an authority that they don't possess. And only a certified law enforcement officer has the authority to detain and write a ticket. And if we have somebody out there calling the police every 30 minutes because they have a perceived danger, then you're taking the police away from the stuff that they need to be doing.
Yeah, I think I'd really like to. I know this is. I've talked to Creighton about this idea too, and it's really interesting hearing your side. And what I'm hearing from both sides is that there should be more presence in the park, and you know, as we come into budgeting and staff and thinking about how we can make the city safer and the park safer, I would really like there to be more discussions on that with everybody. I'm really sick of being invited to go to the playground in Dolores with my toddler because people don't want to take their kids to our parks. So I would just really like to see that be addressed.
And that's the biggest thing I'm worried about, is that very issue right there, because if the, you know, mainstream folks, the people with families and so on, quit going to our parks, then they are left to another element that's less than desirable and that does commit criminal acts. It's a difficult thing, because if, you know, the reality is there are no silver bullets. And, you know, Creighton and I have talked about the park ranger thing before. I tend to not be really in favor of it, because I think it's a good idea that probably won't work. I think it's going to be expensive, and I think it's going to be more trouble than it's worth. On the other hand, do we have a sworn officer in there? Well, that's a really expensive thing when 99% of that person's time is not going to be doing anything other than being in presence. And, you know, that's a very expensive scarecrow. And so we're going to have to figure out the right answers to all that. And, you know, I think there's some conclusion there, but I don't think I can't think of, in my law enforcement experience, of people, you know, law enforcement agencies having dedicated people to a park, except for major things like New York or something like that. But an agency our size, that's a little different. But we've got to work it out. We've got to figure it out, because what Councilmember DeHaven just said is exactly my biggest fear, that you just hit it.
I get invited to go to the park in Dolores from people who live in Cortez almost weekly.
And we've got to find a way to.
Yeah, so, and you know, I'd love to hear what other cities do, and, you know, I'd love to not reinvent the wheel, but yeah. So thanks for bringing that up, April.
What would be your solution? What would you think would be a move in the right direction? I mean, we're just talking here. All we're doing is talking, so.
You know, without talking with anybody else, I see those e-bikes being the best solution, in that they can be in the park, but they can also be anywhere in town in just a couple minutes. So we're not losing the officer on the street as much as we are if we just have somebody on a bicycle or have somebody walking in the park. We have someone that can actually respond to calls outside the park and get around quite quick. Mm-hmm. So that's going to help. We haven't utilized it yet.
Right. Yeah, do you just have one e-bike right now?
We have two.
Two, okay, great.
But what we don't have is an officer to get out there all the time on it.
Right.
But there are other things we can do besides hiring just a full-time officer, and we will explore some of these things. One of the ones that just comes to my mind is, you know, doing overtime shifts of some sort. That, you know, it's a lot cheaper to fund some overtime to give officers time to come in and, you know, be in and around the park versus hiring a full-time officer with everything that goes into that. But again, things we will talk about in the budget, and we're starting in earnest now. So,
Is there a diurnal cycle to this? Is it more in the day or more in the night, or when is the most of the problems that you would encounter in the park? Are they happen?
It's most of the day.
Mostly day?
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it doesn't happen in the evening, but it's most of the daytime stuff.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chief Brock. We appreciate your time and comments and being able to answer our questions. I think the only thing I wanted to bring up, just give you guys an early heads up that I will be missing the first meeting in November. I will be absent for the November 12th meeting, which is the day after Veterans Day, and that will be the second reading of the budget. So Lydia will get her first chance running a good meeting, so. Okay. Any other topics or? All right, we'll adjourn this meeting and start